ambassador to Russia. But right now, Ken Delaney, an NBC's intelligence and national security reporter, who, as I mentioned, has been reporting on this for some time. The Russia side of this, what do you take away from it?
Well, Ari, as you just laid out there, NBC News has interviewed Veselnitskaya, this Russian lawyer, on two separate occasions, one on camera with Keir Simmons, and the second time by phone in September. Her story really changed over the course of those two interactions. As you saw there, she initially denied that she had any connection to the Kremlin or to the Russian government, for that matter. And she also denied in that interview that she offered any dirt on Hillary Clinton in the Trump Tower meeting. In the second interview in September, she acknowledged to us that she did bring information she thought was derogatory to Clinton and the Democrats to that meeting. She gave us a copy of the memo. We had it translated. It talks about potentially some political contributions that she thought would be embarrassing. She also acknowledged that she had been in talks with this Russian prosecutor. Now, as she tells it, she was the one that got the Russian prosecutor interested in this tax evasion case that she says happened. But, you know, the New York Times story raises a question about whether it was the other way around, how closely they were coordinating. But here's what's clear. This is a lawyer who has very close connections to the Kremlin and to an official with close connection to Vladimir Putin. There's just no disputing that, Ari.
And you're digging in on some of the complexity, so I want to pause on it because there is so much that can rattle around here in the newsroom. You're raising 2 points. One, the chicken and egg of the source of that information. Okay. Was she pushing this Putin ally? Was she getting it from a Putin ally? But that, for our purposes here, journalistically, seems less important than the core claim, which was, is she in touch with this prosecutor? New York Times reporting yes, which is the opposite of what I just played, of the Trump team's defense. No, this was just pretending they knew someone. Oh, I know a lot of people, and that was a way to get the meeting. Reading from the New York Times account, it says, how Ms. Veselnitskaya's allegations made their way to the upper reaches of the Russian government and then to the Trump campaign is a tangled tale. Indeed it is, but Ken, when you look at the tale, would you say the ongoing evidence, some of which you've reported and some of which is in this news story, undercuts the Trump characterization of the meeting?
I think that's a fair characterization, Ari. And let's remember what this is about. This is about the Magnitsky Act, which is a series of sanctions on wealthy Russians, on Putin's friends. It's one of his top priorities is to get rid of these sanctions. And this woman has spent a career lobbying and trying to do that. And now, you know, it's very clear that she was doing so in coordination with a senior Russian prosecutor who's a close associate of Vladimir Putin.
Stay with me, Ken. I want to bring in Howard Fineman, a global editorial director for Huffington Post, and former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul. Ambassador Yuri Chaika, this Putin-allied prosecutor, in the mix here. Explain why this matters, according to this new reporting.
Well, Yuri Chaika is one of the most senior people in the Putin's world. He's been very close to Vladimir Putin for many, many years. You know, it'd be meeting with one of the top people in the cabinet in the Trump administration, if you think about it in a comparative way. And the second thing I just want to add for context is about how the nature of the Russian political system works. Think about, had she just shown up by herself, meeting with the campaign team, the son of the possibly the next president of the United States? It seems rather naive to believe that she would do that just all on her own, especially working in the. I think it'd be naive to think about that for any country. But in Russia, in Putin's world, of course, she was in contact with the Russian government about that trip. There's just no doubt in my mind.
Howard, what are you thinking about on this Friday night?
Добрый вечер, Ari. I'm thinking
Добрый вечер.
I wish I could participate in this. Someone tells me what it means.
I'm thinking a couple things. First of all, if Donald Trump Jr. repeats under oath in front of the committees or in front of the prosecutor the baloney that we now know he was spewing out on television, he's going to be in serious trouble based on what we now know.
You're saying, let's pause on that, Howard. You were saying the false statement offered to Fox News, if these accounts are correct, is unfortunate. But if you offer the same statement in a legal proceeding, it becomes felonious.
I think potentially very dangerous legally, because I think we're increasingly learning that this was a substantive act here, that this was a, by the way, this theory about the Democratic donors and the Magnitsky Act and so on, this is something that they're talking about openly in Russia right now. Vladimir Putin has been at a couple of conferences recently, as the New York Times reports in their story, talking about this very theory. And that leads me to the other thought I have tonight, which is that the Russians, even now, are directly involved in trying to discredit Robert Mueller and the investigation and distract attention from the probes of Donald Trump and trying to throw them elsewhere.
Well, you
in
make,
other words, Putin,
Howard,
Putin isn't done yet.
You make such an important point, as you often do, drawing the link from what is international coverage, what Putin is saying abroad, all the way in. Let me play for you, Howard, for your response, and then the ambassador. Sarah Huckabee Sanders today denying collusion, as is her right and as she's done before, and then referring to some of the same arguments and that are now being put back in some sort of investigative climate that tries to sort of accuse everyone else of what is under investigation with regard to the Trumps, this collusion. Take a listen.
There's been a number of politicians over the past week, including Chris Christie here at the White House yesterday, who have said that Rob Mueller should step aside from certain investigations within the special counsel. Does the president share those views?
The president wants to see this completed. There's still no evidence of collusion between the president and anyone. If any collusion took place, it would be between the DNC and the Clintons.
Howard and then the ambassador.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening here. And I think the reason that Putin is talking about this openly, the theory that Veselnitskaya was trying to sell to Don Jr., is because the Russians want to help Donald Trump turn the attention away from the probe against him and back on the Clintons. And don't forget, Vladimir Putin has a double interest here. He wants to ally with and help out Trump if he can, I think ultimately still, despite their public disagreements. And he's still interested in payback on Hillary Clinton.
Ambassador?
Two things. First of all, on collusion. Veselnitskaya came to that campaign meeting with the Trump campaign people to achieve an objective, to lift sanctions. She claimed that she had something to offer in return, and based on that transaction, they attempted to do a transaction. Whether they did or not, we don't know exactly the details, but the attempt at collusion was there. And number two, the thing about Clinton and the DNC, that's a classic Putin strategy called whataboutism. Let's detract from the story at hand and talk about something that is totally peripheral and insignificant, in my opinion.
And Ken,
Ari, could I just make one other point? Here's what my intelligence sources say about this meeting. The Russians would not send their A-team to a first meeting to try to test whether the Trump campaign was willing to collude, because what if the Trump campaign had called the FBI? So when you look at these Russian players, and in point of fact, you know, the information that they said was derogatory to Clinton and the Democrats, I've looked at it. It really wasn't. It was very superficial. It was kind of a nothing burger. But the fact that the Trump campaign took the meeting based on a promise of help from the Russian government, that's what I think is most significant about this.
Ambassador, you're shaking your head briefly.
Yeah, I agree. You're not going to give everything away in the first meeting. That was a fishing exercise to see if they wanted to play. It turns out that maybe they didn't, and we need to know the details. But the point was they were coming to do some business together, and both sides wanted to interact in that exchange. It looks like attempted collusion to me. Whether it's illegal or not, that's somebody else to decide. But that they wanted to cooperate and were trying to cooperate, I think that's pretty self-evident.
Right, and whether it was illegal, I have a federal prosecutor going to join me after the break on that question, and also we're going to dig into what you were raising, the whataboutism, because there's a lot more on the Russia-Putin side here that's really, I think, important for where the story goes. So Ken Dilanian and Ambassador McFaul, thank you both. Howard, stick around.
Thank you, Ari.
About the Trump Tower